There are mornings that pass unnoticed, slipping quietly into the folds of memory. And then there are mornings that carve themselves into the marrow of a town, never to be forgotten. The morning of October 17, 1878, in the village of Willowbrook, was one such day, a day that began with the innocent laughter of children and ended in a silence so profound it still echoes through the generations. The sun rose over the mist-shrouded fields, casting long, uncertain shadows across the red brick facade of Willowbrook School. Inside, 21 children and their teacher gathered for lessons, their voices a fragile chorus against the creaking timbers and the distant caw of crows. By noon, every desk sat empty. Not a single child remained. No footprints led away from the schoolhouse. No windows were broken, no doors forced. Lunch pails sat untouched. Books lay open, midst linnets, and a single chalk message scrawled in a trembling hand remained on the blackboard. "We are not alone." In the hours and days that followed, the town would search, pray, and accuse, but the children of Willowbrook were never seen again. Their disappearance became a wound that never healed, a story whispered in candlelit kitchens and around dying fires, a warning to those who dared to look too closely at the darkness beneath the surface of ordinary life. Tonight, we open the doors of Willowbrook School once more. We will walk its haunted halls, sift through the evidence, and confront the chilling possibilities that have tormented this town for nearly a century and a half. But be warned, once you know what happened here, you may never look at a child's laughter the same way again. Are you ready to step inside? Willowbrook, in 1878, was the kind of place that seemed, at first glance, to exist outside the reach of time's cruelties. Nestled in a gentle valley, the town was a patchwork of white clapboard houses, tidy gardens, and winding dirt roads that curled through fields of golden wheat and wildflowers. The air was thick with the scent of lilac in spring and wood smoke in autumn, and the townsfolk, farmers, mill workers, and shopkeepers, moved through their days with the quiet assurance of people who believed the world was small, knowable, and safe. At the heart of Willowbrook stood the schoolhouse, a proud two-story structure of red brick and slate, its bell tower rising above the maples like a watchful eye. Built just a decade earlier, the school was the town's pride, a symbol of progress and hope, a promise to the next generation that they would be better, wiser, more prepared for the world beyond the valley. Each morning, the children of Willowbrook, dressed in starched pinafores and patched trousers, would gather at the iron gate, their laughter ringing out as they chased each other across the dew-soaked grass. Their faces, flushed with the promise of youth, seemed untouched by sorrow or fear. Yet beneath this veneer of innocence, Willowbrook was a town shaped by its secrets. The Civil War was still a fresh wound, its ghosts lingering in the eyes of fathers and the empty chairs at supper tables. Superstition clung to the edges of daily life, charms hung above doorways, and stories of witches and wandering spirits were passed down in hushed voices. The woods that bordered the town were thick and dark, a place where children were warned never to stray, and where, it was said, the old gods still whispered to those who dared to listen. The school itself, for all its modern trappings, was not immune to these shadows. Its corridors were lined with portraits of stern-faced benefactors and faded maps of distant lands. But there were corners where the light never seemed to reach, and rumors of strange noises at night persisted among the students. Some said the building was cursed, that it had been erected on land best left undisturbed. Others dismissed such talk as childish fancy, the product of overactive imaginations, and too many ghost stories by the fire. But even the most rational minds could not ignore the peculiarities that marked Willowbrook's history. There had been disappearances before: farmhand, gone missing in the woods; a peddler who vanished on the road to the next town. But never anything like what would happen in the autumn of 1878. The townspeople, for all their faith in reason and progress, lived with a constant, low hum of anxiety, a sense that something ancient and unknowable lurked just beyond the edge of their understanding. It was a time of transition, both for the town and the world beyond. The telegraph had arrived, bringing news of distant cities and strange inventions. But it had also brought stories of madness, disease, and violence. The old ways were dying, but the new ways had not yet taken root, leaving Willowbrook suspended between past and future, certainty and doubt. In this liminal space, the children of Willowbrook thrived and played, their laughter a fragile bulwark against the encroaching dark. They skipped rope in the shadow of the schoolhouse, traded secrets beneath the ancient oak, and dared each other to peer into the boarded-up cellar where, it was said, something waited. Their innocence was both a shield and a lure, drawing the attention of forces human and otherwise that watched from the margins. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, a sense of unease began to settle over the town. Parents found themselves waking in the night, gripped by nameless fears. Teachers noticed a restlessness in their pupils, a tendency to stare out the window as if listening for something only they could hear. The church bells rang more often, calling the faithful to prayer, but even the sanctuary felt less secure, as if the walls themselves were listening. Willowbrook in 1878 was a place of contradictions, light and shadow, hope and dread, innocence and the ever-present threat of loss. It was here, in this fragile balance, that the story of the lost class would unfold, a story that would shatter the illusion of safety and leave the town forever changed. And as you walk these streets with us, remember, even the brightest places can cast the darkest shadows. They were 21 in all, the children of Willowbrook's third form, gathered each morning beneath the school's bell tower, their faces bright with the promise of youth. Each child was a world unto themselves, a constellation of hopes, fears, and small, secret dreams. Their names, once spoken daily in roll call and whispered in playground games, have become a litany of loss, a roll of innocence forever suspended in time. There was Clara Finch, the baker's daughter, whose laughter was said to be as sweet as her father's honey cakes. She wore her hair in two neat braids and carried a battered copy of Little Women everywhere she went, reading aloud to the younger children beneath the old oak tree. Her mother, widowed by the war, worked long hours in the bakery, and Clara often stayed late at school, waiting for her to finish. She was the first to arrive that morning, her satchel packed with a carefully wrapped apple for her teacher. Beside her sat Samuel and Thomas Reed, twin brothers with a reputation for mischief. Their father, a stern man with a limp from Gettysburg, expected discipline, but the boys were wild as colts, forever daring each other to climb higher, run faster, laugh louder. They shared everything: secrets, bruises, and a single, tattered scarf their mother had knitted from leftover wool. On the morning of the disappearance, they had been planning a prank involving a frog and the inkwell, a secret they never got to share. Eleanor Price, the minister's daughter, was the quietest in the class, her eyes always downcast, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wrote poetry in the margins of her lessons and sang hymns in a voice so pure it brought tears to her father's eyes. She was often teased for her shyness, but her classmates would later recall the way she seemed to sense things others could not, pausing mid-sentence, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. There was Henry Blackwell, the miller's son, whose hands were already rough from helping his father at the wheel. He dreamed of becoming an engineer, building bridges and machines that would change the world. His pockets were always full of gears and bits of string, and he was forever sketching inventions in the dust with a stick. That morning, he had shown his latest drawing to his teacher, who praised his ingenuity and promised to show it to the school board. Among them, too, was little Mary Ellen Carter, just 6 years old, allowed to join the older children because her mother worked as the school's cleaner. Mary Ellen was a sprite, darting between desks, her hair a wild halo of curls. She had a habit of hiding in cupboards and jumping out to startle her classmates, her giggle echoing down the halls. Her mother would later say she had a nightmare the night before, waking in tears and unable to say why. The teacher, Miss Abigail Hawthorne, was a woman of 30, unmarried and fiercely intelligent. She had come to Willowbrook from Boston, her references impeccable, her manner both kind and exacting. The children adored her, though some parents whispered that she was too modern, too curious about things best left alone. Miss Hawthorne kept a journal filled with observations about her students and the strange happenings she sometimes noticed in unexplained drafts. Odd noises after dark, the feeling of being watched. She believed in the power of education to banish ignorance, but she was not immune to the superstitions that clung to the town. Each child brought their own story, their own burdens and joys, into the classroom that autumn. Some came from families marked by loss, others from homes filled with laughter and light. They shared lunches, secrets, and the small rituals of childhood games of marbles, whispered dares, the exchange of friendship tokens carved from wood or bone. They were, in every sense, a family. Yet, as the days grew shorter and the shadows lengthened, a subtle change crept into the classroom. Children began to complain of strange dreams, of voices calling from the woods, of cold hands brushing their faces in the night. Miss Hawthorne noted a restlessness, a sense of unease that seemed to settle over the class like a shroud. Books went missing, chalkboards were found scrawled with symbols no one could decipher, and once a bird flew in through an open window, circling the room before crashing into the glass and falling lifeless to the floor. Parents dismissed these incidents as childish imagination, the result of too many ghost stories and the coming of winter. But Miss Hawthorne was not so sure. She wrote in her journal of a presence, something she could not name, but felt, nonetheless, at the edges of her vision. She began to keep the classroom door locked during lessons, and she warned the children never to wander the halls alone. On the morning of October 17th, the children arrived as usual, their faces bright, their voices loud. They hung their coats, unpacked their lunches, and settled into their seats, unaware that they were living the final moments of their ordinary lives. In the hours that followed, something would reach across the threshold of Willowbrook School and claim them, leaving only questions, grief, and the faintest trace of their laughter lingering in the air. The lost class of Willowbrook 21 children and their beloved teacher would become a legend, a cautionary tale, and a mystery that would haunt the town for generations. And as we remember their names and stories, we are left to wonder what darkness waited for them just beyond the edge of the known world. The news spread through Willowbrook like wildfire, igniting panic and disbelief in equal measure. By the time the church bell tolled a second time, the schoolyard was crowded with parents, their faces pale and drawn, voices rising in frantic confusion. Mothers clutched at each other, calling their children's names into the empty air, while fathers stormed through the building, searching every closet, every crawl space, every shadowed corner. The school's caretaker, Mr. Hargrove, stood by the classroom door, wringing his cap in his hands, unable to explain what he had found, or rather, what he had not. Within the hour, the town's constable, Elias Morton, arrived, his boots caked with mud from the hurried ride. Morton was a practical man, a veteran of the war, and he wasted no time in organizing a search. He ordered the school grounds combed, from end to end, the woods scoured, the riverbanks checked for any sign of the missing. Volunteers formed lines, moving shoulder to shoulder through the fields, calling out the children's names until their voices cracked. Dogs were brought in, their noses pressed to the ground, but they found no scent, no trail, nothing to follow but the growing sense of dread. Inside the school, the scene was one of chaos and heartbreak. Mothers wept over abandoned lunch pails. Fathers pored over the children's desks, searching for clues. Miss Hawthorne's journal was passed from hand to hand, its final entries read aloud in trembling voices. Strange dreams, she had written. Children restless, a presence in the room. Must not let them out of my sight. The words only deepened the mystery, fueling rumors that something unnatural had taken place. As the hours passed, the town divided along old, invisible lines. Some clung to reason, insisting there must be a logical explanation, a hidden passage, a mass escape, a cruel prank gone too far. They searched for footprints, questioned every passerby, and sent riders to neighboring towns in case the children had wandered off. Others, however, fell back on superstition, their voices rising in fearful whispers. They spoke of the old stories, the haunted woods, the cursed land, the spirits that were said to walk at dusk. Some blamed the school itself, claiming it had been built on ground best left undisturbed. The church became a gathering place for the desperate. Reverend Price, his face ashen, led prayers for the safe return of the children, his voice trembling as he begged for mercy. Candles flickered in the windows, casting long shadows across the pews. Some parents clung to hope, refusing to leave the sanctuary, convinced that faith alone would bring their children home. Others, their hope already crumbling, demanded answers, their grief turning quickly to anger. As night fell, the search grew more frantic. Lanterns bobbed through the fields, their light swallowed by the encroaching dark. The woods, so familiar by day, became a labyrinth of fear, every snapping twig and rustling leaf a possible sign. Some searchers claimed to hear voices, faint, distant, calling for help, but when they followed the sound, they found only silence. Others reported strange lights flickering among the trees, or the sudden, inexplicable chill that seemed to settle over certain clearings. The authorities from the county seat arrived before midnight, bringing with them a sense of order and skepticism. They questioned the townsfolk, took statements, and examined the school from top to bottom. They found no evidence of forced entry, no sign of struggle, no indication that the children had left of their own accord. The message on the blackboard, "We are not alone," was photographed and copied, but its meaning remained elusive. Some dismissed it as a childish prank, others as a warning from Miss Hawthorne herself. In the days that followed, the search expanded. Posters bearing the children's faces were nailed to trees and fence posts. The river was dragged, wells were checked, and abandoned barns were searched from rafter to root cellar. The town's blacksmith, a man not given to flights of fancy, swore he saw a line of small footprints leading into the marsh. But when others followed, they found nothing but mud and reeds. A traveling peddler, passing through on his way to Boston, claimed to have seen a group of children walking hand in hand along the old road at dawn. But his story changed with each telling, and no trace of the children was ever found. As hope faded, suspicion grew. Some whispered that Miss Hawthorne had led the children away, bewitched by some dark force. Others accused outsiders, the drifter who had camped by the river, the peddler with his shifting stories, even the new doctor who had arrived just weeks before. The town, once united in grief, began to fracture under the weight of fear and uncertainty. Yet, through it all, a few refused to give up. Clara Finch's mother kept a candle burning in her window each night, convinced her daughter would find her way home. The Reed twins' father patrolled the woods with his old rifle, calling their names into the darkness. Mary Ellen's mother scrubbed the school floors until her hands bled, as if she could wash away the nightmare and bring her child back. The search for the lost class of Willowbrook became more than a quest for missing children, became a test of faith, of reason, of the very fabric of the community. Some found strength in a shared ordeal, forging bonds that would last a lifetime. Others were broken by it, their lives forever marked by the unanswered question, how could 21 children and their teacher vanish without a trace? And now, as you listen to this story, ask yourself, what would you have done? Would you have searched the woods, braved the darkness, clung to hope, or surrendered to despair? Would you have trusted your neighbors, or looked for evil in their eyes? Share your thoughts below, because in mysteries like this, every voice. In the weeks that followed the disappearance, Willowbrook became a crucible of suspicion and speculation. The search had yielded nothing but questions, and in the vacuum of certainty, theories multiplied like shadows at dusk. Each new idea was a lifeline for some, a source of terror for others. The town's collective mind became a battleground between science and superstition, trust and suspicion, reason and the irresistible pull of the unknown. The first and most immediate theory was abduction. Constable Morton, ever the pragmatist, clung to this explanation with the tenacity of a drowning man. He interrogated every stranger who had passed through Willowbrook in the preceding weeks. The drifter who had camped by the river, the peddler with his shifting stories, the new doctor whose accent marked him as an outsider. The drifter, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, was found sleeping in a barn, and brought before the town council. He denied any involvement, insisting he had left town before the children vanished. The peddler, cornered at the edge of the next village, claimed to have seen nothing but the road ahead. The doctor, Dr. Silas Crane, submitted to questioning with weary patience, his answers measured and precise. He had been tending to a feverish child on the other side of town at the time of the disappearance, a fact confirmed by several witnesses. Yet, for all the scrutiny, no evidence of abduction was ever found. There were no footprints leading away from the school, no signs of struggle, no ransom note or demand. The children's belongings remained untouched, their lunches uneaten, their coats still hanging on their pegs. The abduction theory, so comforting in its familiarity, began to fray at the edges. If someone had taken the children, how had they done so without leaving a single trace? As the days passed and hope dwindled, darker theories took root. Whispers of cult activity began to circulate, fueled by old stories and the fevered imagination of a town on the brink. Some recalled the tales of secret societies that had once flourished in the region, groups that met by moonlight in the woods, performing rituals to appease ancient gods. The school, it was said, had been built on land once used for such gatherings. A few townsfolk claimed to have seen strange figures moving through the trees at night, their faces hidden by hoods, their voices raised in unholy chant. The evidence for cult involvement was circumstantial at best, but it was enough to ignite a wave of paranoia. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, searching for signs of hidden allegiance. The church became a fortress, its doors barred against the night. Reverend Price, desperate to protect his flock, denounced the rumors from the pulpit, but even he could not quell the rising tide of fear. Some parents, driven to the edge by grief, began to search their own homes for signs of the occult, strange symbols, hidden books, anything that might explain the unexplainable. Then there were those who believed the answer lay not in human hands, but in forces beyond comprehension. The supernatural had always been a part of Willowbrook's landscape, woven into the fabric of its history. The woods were said to be haunted, the river cursed, the land itself marked by ancient sorrow. Stories of vanished travelers, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable phenomena were passed down from generation to generation, dismissed by some, feared by others. In the wake of the disappearance, these stories gained new life. Some claimed to have seen the children's faces in the mist, their voices carried on the wind. Others spoke of lights flickering in the schoolhouse at midnight, or of a shadowy figure glimpsed at the edge of the woods. The message on the blackboard, "We are not alone," became a rallying cry for those who believed the children had been taken by something not of this world. Theories ranged from vengeful spirits to fairy abductions, from portals to other realms to ancient curses awakened by the school's construction. Science, of course, offered its own explanations. Dr. Crane, the new physician, suggested the possibility of mass hysteria, psychological phenomenon in which a group, under extreme stress, could experience shared delusions or even physical symptoms. He pointed to the strange dreams, the reports of cold spots and unexplained noises, the growing sense of unease that had gripped the town in the weeks before the disappearance. Perhaps, he argued, the children and their teacher had fallen victim to a collective breakdown, fleeing into the woods in a state of confusion and fear. This theory, though rational, was met with resistance. The parents could not accept that their children, so bright, so full of life, could simply lose themselves to madness. The idea was both too simple and too terrible, offering no comfort, no hope of return. Yet, as the days turned to weeks and the search yielded nothing, some began to wonder if the truth might be stranger and sadder than any story of ghosts or cults. The contrast between these competing theories tore at the fabric of Willowbrook. Science and superstition, trust and suspicion, hope and despair each vied for dominance. Each offered its own kind of solace and its own brand of terror. Families who had once shared Sunday dinners now crossed the street to avoid each other. Old friends became enemies, united only by their shared grief and the gnawing need for answers. Miss Hawthorne, though absent, became a figure of fascination and fear. Some insisted she had been a victim, swept up with her students by forces beyond her control. Others whispered that she had been the cause, her curiosity and modern ideas, opening a door that should have remained closed. Her journal, pored over by the authorities, offered tantalizing hints, but no clear answers. "There is something here," she had written in her final entry. "Something old, something watching. I must protect the children. I must not let it in." Theories continued to multiply, each more outlandish than the last. Some suggested the children had been spirited away by a traveling circus. Others that they had fallen into a hidden cave beneath the school. A few, driven to the edge by grief, insisted the children were still there, trapped between worlds, their voices echoing in the empty halls. And so, the mystery deepened, each new theory casting its own shadow over the town. The people of Willowbrook found themselves caught between the comfort of reason and the terror of the unknown, between the urge to blame and the need to believe. The schoolhouse, once a symbol of hope, became a monument to uncertainty, a place where every answer only led to more questions. As you listen to these theories, ask yourself, which would you believe? Would you trust in science or surrender to superstition? Would you look for evil in the hearts of men or in the darkness beyond the firelight? Share your thoughts below because, in the end, the truth of Willowbrook may be stranger than any story we can tell. And sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved. In the weeks that followed the disappearance, Willowbrook became a crucible of suspicion and speculation. The search had yielded nothing but questions, and in the vacuum of certainty, theories multiplied like shadows at dusk. Each new idea was a lifeline for some, a source of terror for others. The town's collective mind became a battleground between science and superstition, trust and suspicion, reason and the irresistible pull of the unknown. The first and most immediate theory was abduction. Constable Morton, ever the pragmatist, clung to this explanation with the tenacity of a drowning man. He interrogated every stranger who had passed through Willowbrook in the preceding weeks. The drifter who had camped by the river. The peddler with his shifting stories. The new doctor whose accent marked him as an outsider. The drifter, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, was found sleeping in a barn and brought before the town council. He denied any involvement, insisting he had left town before the children vanished. The peddler, cornered at the edge of the next village, claimed to have seen nothing but the road ahead. The doctor, Dr. Silas Crane, submitted to questioning with weary patience, his answers measured and precise. He had been tending to a feverish child on the other side of town at the time of the disappearance, a fact confirmed by several witnesses. Yet, for all the scrutiny, no evidence of abduction was ever found. There were no footprints leading away from the school, no signs of struggle, no ransom note or demand. The children's belongings remained untouched, their lunches uneaten, their coats still hanging on their pegs. The abduction theory, so comforting in its familiarity, began to fray at the edges. If someone had taken the children, how had they done so without leaving a single trace? As the days passed and hope dwindled, darker theories took root. Whispers of cult activity began to circulate, fueled by old stories and the fevered imagination of a town on the brink. Some recalled the tales of secret societies that had once flourished in the region, groups that met by moonlight in the woods, performing rituals to appease ancient gods. The school, it was said, had been built on land once used for such gatherings. A few townsfolk claimed to have seen strange figures moving through the trees at night, their faces hidden by hoods, their voices raised in unholy chant. The evidence for cult involvement was circumstantial at best, but it was enough to ignite a wave of paranoia. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, searching for signs of hidden allegiance. The church became a fortress, its doors barred against the night. Reverend Price, desperate to protect his flock, denounced the rumors from the pulpit, but even he could not quell the rising tide of fear. Some parents, driven to the edge by grief, began to search their own homes for signs of the occult, strange symbols, hidden books, anything that might explain the unexplainable. Then there were those who believed the answer lay not in human hands, but in forces beyond comprehension. The supernatural had always been a part of Willowbrook's landscape, woven into the fabric of its history. The woods were said to be haunted, the river cursed, the land itself marked by ancient sorrow. Stories of vanished travelers, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable phenomena were passed down from generation to generation, dismissed by some, feared by others. In the wake of the disappearance, these stories gained new life. Some claimed to have seen the children's faces in the mist, their voices carried on the wind. Others spoke of lights flickering in the schoolhouse at midnight, or of a shadowy figure glimpsed at the edge of the woods. The message on the blackboard, "We are not alone," became a rallying cry for those who believed the children had been taken by something not of this world. Theories ranged from vengeful spirits to fairy abductions, from portals to other realms, to ancient curses awakened by the school's construction. Science, of course, offered its own explanations. Dr. Crane, the new physician, suggested the possibility of mass hysteria, psychological phenomenon in which a group, under extreme stress, could experience shared delusions or even physical symptoms. He pointed to the strange dreams, the reports of cold spots and unexplained noises, the growing sense of unease that had gripped the town in the weeks before the disappearance. Perhaps, he argued, the children and their teacher had fallen victim to a collective breakdown, fleeing into the woods in a state of confusion and fear. This theory, though rational, was met with resistance. The parents could not accept that their children so bright, so full of life could simply lose themselves to madness. The idea was both too simple and too terrible, offering no comfort, no hope of return. Yet, as the days turned to weeks and the search yielded nothing, some began to wonder if the truth might be stranger and sadder than any story of ghosts or cults. The contrast between these competing theories tore at the fabric of Willowbrook. Science and superstition, trust and suspicion, hope and despair each vied for dominance. Each offered its own kind of solace and its own brand of terror. Families who had once shared Sunday dinners now crossed the street to avoid each other. Old friends became enemies, united only by their shared grief and the gnawing need for answers. Miss Hawthorne, though absent, became a figure of fascination and fear. Some insisted she had been a victim, swept up with her students by forces beyond her control. Others whispered that she had been the cause, her curiosity and modern ideas, opening a door that should have remained closed. Her journal, pored over by the authorities, offered tantalizing hints but no clear answers. "There is something here," she had written in her final entry, "something old, something watching. I must protect the children. I must not let it in." Theories continued to multiply, each more outlandish than the last. Some suggested the children had been spirited away by a traveling circus. Others that they had fallen into a hidden cave beneath the school. A few, driven to the edge by grief, insisted the children were still there, trapped between worlds, their voices echoing in the empty halls. And so, the mystery deepened, each new theory casting its own shadow over the town. The people of Willowbrook found themselves caught between the comfort of reason and the terror of the unknown, between the urge to blame and the need to believe. The schoolhouse, once a symbol of hope, became a monument to uncertainty, a place where every answer only led to more questions. As you listen to these theories, ask yourself, which would you believe? Would you trust in science or surrender to superstition? Would you look for evil in the hearts of men or in the darkness beyond the firelight? Share your thoughts below because, in the end, the truth of Willowbrook may be stranger than any story we can tell. And sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved. As autumn deepened and the first frost silvered the fields, Willowbrook's grief curdled into something darker. The search parties dwindled, their hope exhausted by endless, fruitless days. The posters faded and tore in the wind. The schoolhouse, once the heart of the town, stood silent and shuttered, its bell mute, its windows staring blankly at the road. But the true horror was not in the empty desks or the vanished laughter, was in the way the living began to look at one another. It started with whispers, At first they were soft, almost apologetic, spoken behind closed doors and in the hush of candlelit kitchens. "Did you see how Mrs. Finch never cries? I heard the Reed's father was seen in the woods at night. Miss Hawthorne was always too clever for her own good." The grief that had once united Willowbrook now became a wedge, prying open old wounds and festering resentments. Suspicion, once a trickle, became a flood. The church, which had been a sanctuary, became a stage for accusation. At Sunday service, Reverend Price's sermons grew fevered, his voice cracking as he pleaded for unity and forgiveness. But the congregation sat stiff and silent, their eyes darting from pew to pew. Some families stopped attending altogether, unwilling to face the stares and the muttered prayers. Others clung to ritual with desperate fervor, as if the right hymn or the right prayer might ward off the darkness. Neighbors who had once shared bread and laughter now crossed the street to avoid each other. Children were kept indoors, their play silenced by fear. The market, once a place of gossip and barter, became a gauntlet of suspicion. Every gesture, every word, was weighed and measured for hidden meaning. The blacksmith's wife was seen burning a bundle of herbs behind her house. Was it a charm or something more sinister? The miller's son was caught drawing strange symbols in the dust. Was it grief or a sign of guilt? The authorities, desperate for answers, began to turn on the townsfolk. Constable Morton, his confidence eroded by failure, questioned the same people again and again, his tone growing sharper with each interview. He demanded alibis, searched homes, and confiscated anything that seemed out of place: old books, odd trinkets, even a child's collection of marbles. The line between investigation and persecution blurred, and soon no one felt safe. Rumors of witchcraft and devilry, once the province of old wives' tales, gained new currency. The woods, already feared, became a place of dread. Some claimed to see lights moving among the trees at night, or to hear chanting carried on the wind. A group of men, emboldened by drink and desperation, stormed the home of an elderly widow who lived at the edge of town, convinced she was to blame. They found nothing but a frightened woman and a house full of cats, but the damage was done. The widow was shunned, her name spoken only in whispers. The children's families, once bound by shared loss, began to fracture. Grief turned to blame, and blame to rage. The Reed's father accused the Finches of hiding something. Mrs. Carter lashed out at the Price family, convinced their piety was a mask for darker deeds. Fights broke out in the street, and more than one home was vandalized under cover of darkness. The bonds that had held Willowbrook together for generations were stretched to the breaking point. Even within families, trust began to erode. Husbands and wives argued late into the night, their voices rising in anger and despair. Siblings eyed each other with suspicion, searching for signs of guilt or complicity. Some parents, unable to bear the uncertainty, began to question their own memories. Had they missed a sign, a warning, a moment when everything could have been different? The weight of not knowing became a poison, seeping into every conversation, every silence. The psychological toll was immense. Nightmares plagued the town, dreams of empty classrooms, of children's voices calling from the dark, of doors that would not open, no matter how hard they were pushed. Some townsfolk began to see things in the corners of their vision, fleeting shadows, faces in the mist, the flicker of movement where there should be none. The line between reality and imagination blurred, and more than one person was found wandering the streets at dawn, unable to remember how they had gotten there. The horror of Willowbrook was not just in the loss of its children, but in the way that loss hollowed out the town from within. The schoolhouse, once a beacon, became a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Some called for it to be torn down, to erase the memory of what had happened. Others insisted it must stand, a monument to the missing, a warning to future generations. But no one could agree, and so it stood, empty and decaying, a wound that would not heal. And through it all, the question lingered: who could be trusted? Was the enemy outside, lurking in the woods or hiding behind a neighbor's smile? Or was the true danger within, festering in the hearts of those who had once loved and trusted each other? The people of Willowbrook, once so certain of their place in the world, now found themselves adrift, their certainties shattered, their faith in each other eroded by fear. Would you trust your neighbors if you lived in Willowbrook? Would you look for comfort in their eyes, or search for secrets in their silences? Would you stand with your community, or turn away in suspicion and self-preservation? Share your thoughts below, because in the end, the greatest horror may not be what happened to the lost class, but what happened to those left behind. As winter crept in and the first snow fell, Willowbrook was a town transformed. The laughter of children was gone, replaced by the low murmur of suspicion and the howl of the wind through empty streets. The mystery of the vanished class remained unsolved, but its legacy was written in the faces of the living in, the lines of worry, the haunted eyes, the hands that trembled as they lit candles against the dark. The descent into paranoia was complete, and Willowbrook would never be the same. Winter's grip tightened around Willowbrook, and the schoolhouse, shuttered and silent, became a place of both dread and fascination. Children dared each other to run up the steps and touch the door, but none lingered long. The adults, for their part, avoided the building altogether, crossing the street rather than pass beneath its shadow. Yet, as the weeks dragged on and the ache of not knowing grew unbearable, a small group of townsfolk, driven by desperation, curiosity, or the need for closure, vowed to search the school one final time. It was Mrs. Carter, Mary Ela's mother, who insisted on leading the way. Her eyes were hollow, her voice brittle, but her determination was unyielding. "We missed something," she said, her words slicing through the fog of resignation that had settled over the town. "We must look again." She was joined by Constable Morton, Reverend Price, and the blacksmith, Mr. Hargrove, each carrying their own burdens of guilt and hope. They gathered at dawn, lanterns in hand, their breaths clouding in the frigid air. Inside, the school was unchanged. Desks sat in neat rows, dust motes swirling in the pale light. The blackboard still bore the chilling message, "We are not alone." The group moved from room to room, searching for anything they might have overlooked. They checked cupboards, lifted floorboards, tapped on walls. Hours passed, and frustration mounted. It was only when Mrs. Carter, driven by some instinct she could not name, pressed her ear to the wall behind the teacher's desk that she heard it, a faint, hollow echo, as if the wall itself were breathing. They pried at the paneling, splinters biting into their hands, until a section gave way with a groan. Behind it, a narrow staircase spiraled downward into darkness. The air that rose from below was cold and damp, tinged with the scent of earth and something older, something metallic. Lanterns held high, the group descended, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust of years. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a small, windowless chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, each crowded with objects that seemed to belong to another world. Jars filled with cloudy liquid, bundles of dried herbs, bones arranged in careful patterns. In the center of the room stood a table, its surface carved with symbols that twisted and writhed in the lantern light. Atop the table lay a book, its cover cracked and stained, its pages filled with writing that none of them could read. Reverend Price recoiled, crossing himself, while Mr. Hargrove muttered a prayer under his breath. But Mrs. Carter, trembling, reached for the book. The writing inside was a mixture of Latin, Greek, and something else, something that seemed to shift and change as she tried to focus on it. The drawings were worse, circles within circles, eyes that stared from the margins, figures with too many limbs, too many mouths. One page showed a ring of children holding hands around a dark, gaping hole. On the far wall, more symbols had been scrawled in chalk, echoing those found on the children's desks in the weeks before their disappearance. Some were smeared, as if someone had tried to erase them in haste. In one corner, a pile of small objects caught the light: ribbons, buttons, a broken doll's head, a single, tiny shoe. Mrs. Carter fell to her knees, sobbing, as she recognized her daughter's favorite hair ribbon among the pile. Constable Morton, his face ashen, searched the room for any sign of a passage or hidden door, but found only solid stone. Yet, the sense of presence in the room was overwhelming, as if the walls themselves were watching. Listening, the group's lanterns flickered, casting monstrous shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The air grew colder, and the low, almost inaudible hum began to vibrate through the floor. Reverend Price, voice shaking, began to recite the Lord's Prayer, but the words seemed to dissolve in the thick, oppressive silence. Mrs. Carter clutched a ribbon to her chest, rocking back and forth. Mr. Hargrove, ever the skeptic, tried to rationalize what they had found. Perhaps the room was the work of a madman, a relic of some forgotten ritual, a place where grief and fear had left their mark. But even he could not explain the feeling that pressed in on them, the certainty that they were not alone. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Carter noticed something scrawled on the underside of the tabula message, written in a child's hand. "We are waiting." The words sent a chill through the group, a final, undeniable confirmation that whatever had happened in Willowbrook was not finished, not buried, not forgotten. They emerged from the hidden room, pale and shaken, carrying with them the book, the artifacts, and the terrible knowledge that the school had harbored secrets far darker than anyone had imagined. Word spread quickly, and the town was thrown into fresh turmoil. Some demanded the school be burned to the ground, its foundations salted and forgotten. Others insisted the room be sealed, its contents destroyed, its memory erased. But there were those who could not look away, who pored over the book's pages by candlelight, searching for meaning in the madness. Theories multiplied. Was the room the site of ancient rituals, a portal to another world, a prison for something that should never have been disturbed? Was Miss Hawthorne a victim or a participant? Had the children been sacrificed, or had they crossed willingly into the unknown? The discovery of the forbidden room was the story's climax, a revelation that shattered what little certainty remained. The artifacts, the writings, the message from beyond all, pointed to a truth too terrible to name. The people of Willowbrook were left with more questions than answers. Their grief deepened by the knowledge that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And as the first snow fell, blanketing the school in silence, the town understood at last that the darkness they had feared was not just in the woods, or in the hearts of their neighbors, but in the very walls that had once sheltered their children. The forbidden room was a wound that would never heal, a secret that would haunt Willowbrook for generations to come. The discovery of the forbidden room marked the end of hope in Willowbrook. The school, once the pride of the town, was closed within days. Its doors were chained, its windows boarded, and the bell that had called generations to learning was taken down and locked away. The building stood as a silent sentinel, a monument to loss and unanswered questions, its shadow stretching long across the snow. For the families of the lost class, life became a slow, grinding ordeal. Grief settled over Willowbrook like a permanent winter, chilling every conversation, every gathering, every attempt at normalcy. Some parents, like Mrs. Carter, refused to leave their children's rooms untouched, dusting the shelves and straightening the beds as if the missing might return at any moment. Others, unable to bear the reminders, packed away toys and clothes, shuttered bedrooms, and tried to erase the evidence of what had been stolen from them. Guilt gnawed at the survivors. Mothers replayed the last morning, searching for signs they had missed: a strange look, a whispered word, a lingering hug. Fathers grew silent and withdrawn, their anger turning inward. Siblings, left behind, struggled with nightmares and the unspoken fear that they, too, might vanish if they let their guard down. The town's children grew up wary, their innocence tempered by the knowledge that the world could change in an instant, that safety was an illusion. The school's closure was both a wound and a balm. Some saw it as a necessary exorcism, a way to contain the evil that had taken root within its walls. Others mourned the loss of a place that had once been filled with laughter and promise. The building became a site of pilgrimage for some, a place to leave flowers, notes, and small tokens in memory of the missing. For others, it was a place to be avoided, a haunted shell best left to rot. The fate of the families varied. Some, like the Finches, eventually moved away. seeking a fresh start in distant towns where the name Willowbrook meant nothing. Others, like the Reeds, remained, their lives shrinking to the boundaries of their grief. Mrs. Carter, who had led the search and found the forbidden room, became a figure of both pity and fear. She was often seen wandering the schoolyard at dusk, her eyes fixed on the empty windows, her lips moving in silent prayer. Reverend Price, whose daughter Eleanor was among the missing, continued to preach, but his sermons grew darker, his faith tinged with doubt. He spoke often of the limits of human understanding, of the dangers of pride and curiosity. Some found comfort in his words, others turned away, unable to reconcile faith with the horror that had unfolded in their midst. Miss Hawthorne's legacy was the most complicated of all. Her journal, recovered from the classroom, became an object of fascination and debate. Some saw her as a martyr, a woman who had tried to protect her students from forces beyond her control. Others whispered that she had been the cause, her intellect and curiosity opening doors that should have remained closed. Her name became a cautionary tale, invoked whenever a child asked too many questions or lingered too long in the shadows. As the years passed, the story of the lost class became both a scar and a legend. Some in Willowbrook tried to forget, burying the memory beneath layers of routine and silence. Others clung to it, passing down the tale to their children and grandchildren, warning them never to stray too far from home, never to enter the school, never to ignore the signs of darkness. The town itself changed, shops closed, families left, and the population dwindled. The schoolhouse, battered by time and weather, became overgrown with ivy, its secrets slowly swallowed by the earth. Yet memory has a way of persisting, even when forgetting seems easier. Each year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, candles appeared on the school steps, their flames flickering in the wind. The names of the lost were read aloud in hushed voices, their faces remembered in fading photographs, and the stories told by those who had known them. The pain never truly faded, but it became a part of Willowbrook's identity, a reminder of what had been lost, and of the dangers that lurk in the spaces between memory and forgetting. In the end, the tragedy of Willowbrook was not just the loss of 21 children and their teacher, but the way that loss echoed through the generations, shaping the town's soul. Some wounds never heal. Some questions are never answered. The schoolhouse stood as a testament to both the place where innocence ended and where the shadows of the past would always linger, waiting to be remembered. What is it about the unknown that so terrifies and fascinates us? In Willowbrook, the disappearance of the children and their teacher became more than a tragedy, became a mirror, reflecting the deepest fears and unanswered questions that haunt every human heart. Loss, in its purest form, is not just the absence of what we love, but the presence of uncertainty, the ache of not knowing. It is the empty chair at the table, the echo of laughter in an abandoned room, the question that lingers long after the search has ended. Why? Fear, too, is a double-edged blade. It can unite us, driving communities to search, to pray, to hold each other close. But it can also divide, turning neighbor against neighbor, sowing suspicion where once there was trust. In Willowbrook, fear became a living thing, shaping the town's fate as surely as any hand or voice. It crept into dreams, colored memories, and left scars that would never fully heal. And then there is the unknown, the vast, uncharted territory that lies just beyond the reach of reason, the forbidden room, the cryptic writings, the sense of a presence watching from the shadows. These are symbols of everything we cannot explain, the mysteries that defy logic and demand humility. Some in Willowbrook sought comfort in science, others in superstition, but neither could offer certainty. Perhaps that is the true horror, the darkness itself, but the knowledge that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. So now, the story passes to you. What do you believe happened in Willowbrook? Was it the work of human hands, a crime hidden by fear and silence? Or did something older, something beyond understanding, reach out and claim the lost class? Do you see echoes of Willowbrook in your own life, in the secrets kept, the questions left unasked, the shadows that sometimes gather at the edge of the familiar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a mystery that refused to be solved? A loss that could not be explained? Do you believe that some truths are better left undiscovered? Or is it our duty to keep searching, no matter the cost? Your voice is part of this story now, and together, perhaps, we can find meaning in the darkness, or, at least, the courage to face it. In the end, Willowbrook's greatest lesson may be this: that the unknown is not our enemy, but our companion, walking beside us through every joy and sorrow, every question and answer. And sometimes, it is in the shadows that we find the truest measure of ourselves. Thank you for walking these haunted halls with me, for braving the shadows and listening to the story of Willowbrook's lost class. If you've made it this far, you are part of a rare community, one that refuses to look away from the darkness, that seeks meaning in the mysteries others would rather forget. Your curiosity, your empathy, and your willingness to question are what keep stories like this alive. If this tale has unsettled you, or if it sparked a memory or a theory of your own, I invite you to share it in the comments below. What do you think happened to the children and Miss Hawthorne? Do you believe the truth will ever come to light, or is Willowbrook destined to remain a riddle, echoing through the years? Your thoughts and stories are the lifeblood of this channel, and I read every one. If you found this journey compelling, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. There are more shadows to explore, more secrets to unearth, and more questions that demand answers. Next time, we'll travel to another forgotten corner of history, a place where the line between fact and nightmare is razor thin, and where the past refuses to stay buried. And before you go, remember, some say that on cold autumn nights, if you stand outside the old Willowbrook School and listen closely, you can still hear the faint sound of children's laughter drifting on the wind. Are you brave enough to listen? Or will you, like so many before, turn away before the truth finds you?